Today we are continuing the Tampa Explained series, and we are going to talk about West Tampa. Here we go. I'm Sam, and thanks for coming by the Living in Tampa, Florida channel, where every single week we make videos about what it's like to live or move to Tampa, Florida. If that's something you want to follow along with, don't forget to subscribe. I'm also a licensed realtor in the state of Florida, so if you have any real estate specific questions or needs, please don't hesitate to reach out. So I moved to the Tampa area a little over a year ago, and I have become a student of the area. This area is actually really interesting to me, partially because of how confusing it is. So this series, the Tampa Explained series, this is part 4. I am just seeking to explain some of the confusion and to lump the areas together in a way that's a little more understandable. And I do this through questions from you. So if you do have specific questions, please comment down below. I do this with questions from my clients, from people that reach out to me, from comments on YouTube videos. All those things combined help me to shape these videos into something that's useful for you. And West Tampa is actually one that I got pretty excited about as I was researching, because this area is pretty interesting and pretty fundamental to the history of the city of Tampa. Just to recap, the city of Tampa is actually only this shape right here that kind of goes from South Tampa up north and then kind of veers northeast up to New Tampa. This shape makes up about 400,000 people, but the overall Tampa area is more like 3 million people and stretches across 4 counties. So it's a little messy, and that's why I want to clarify in this way. So this area of West Tampa is actually just kind of the west side of this shape. It's not really the west side of the whole metro, but there is a part of this area that was a town around the same time that Tampa became a town, and it was called West Tampa, and you still see a lot of things that are reminiscent of that name in this historical district of West Tampa. Even a big water tower that you can see like from Highway 275. It's a really interesting area, and let's get into some of the history. So West Tampa was established in 1892 by a Scottish immigrant named Hugh McFarlane. And part of his original vision for this area was to kind of expand the cigar operations of Cigar City into West Tampa. So he started building infrastructure, started building factories where these hand-rolled cigars could be made. And Tampa was already kind of starting to get this mix of Cubans, Spanish people, and Italians that kind of made up what became known as the Tampa Latins. And this is really kind of an interesting mix, and it makes this area feel pretty unique. So Hugh's idea was, okay, I'll build these cigar factories, and there's already a trained workforce here in the area, and I can, get people to travel from Ybor City across the river to West Tampa to work. But at the time, West Tampa was like the wild part of the area. It was completely undeveloped. And a lot of the workers from Ybor City were not willing to ride the ferry across the Hillsborough River to go to work. So he spent a few more years extending the rail car system from Ybor City into West Tampa so that workers could just ride the rail car, and then the cigar boom happened. So in the early 20th century, the early 1900s, there were more hand-rolled cigars made in Ybor City and West Tampa than any other specific location. So there were still, it's not like they made 80% of the hand-rolled cigars here, but for a concentration of an area, they produced more than any area. And as this was happening, West Tampa continued to grow. West Tampa became an incorporated town in 1895 with a population of around 2,300 people, making it the second largest city in Florida at the time, Tampa being the largest at this time. So during this cigar boom, that's when the area got the name Cigar City. It was a literal cigar city. That was the industry of the area, and infrastructure was built around this kind of manufacturing of hand-rolled cigars. During all of this, interesting little tidbit that I found was that the library that's on Howard Avenue in West Tampa in 1914 was built with a grant from Andrew Carnegie for $17,500, and that library is still there. It was restored in 2004, along with some other redevelopment that started happening in this West Tampa area. But let's go back to the map really quick. So West Tampa as a historic district is this area right here, but the boundary is a little confusing. We're going to talk about the boundary as the south boundary being Highway 60. So this Kennedy Boulevard, Highway 60, dividing South Tampa and West Tampa. And then the east boundary being the Hillsborough River. So, and then a lot of people refer to the boundary of this area, this West Tampa area, as Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard on the north, which used to be called Buffalo Avenue, which is pretty interesting. I wonder why it was called Buffalo. But I want to extend the north boundary a little bit to cover a little bit more of this residential area that happens to be in this chunk, still kind of the west edge of this city of Tampa. And then the western border being Dale Mabry Highway. So West Tampa continued to grow through the early 1900s until the city of Tampa annexed it into the city. So it became part of the city of Tampa in 1925. I can't really see anything online to even know if this was a popular opinion. We talked about the New Tampa annexation, and that was not a very popular opinion at the time. So looking back, I wonder how popular this move was. So during all this time, West Tampa and Ybor City were very connected to each other, having social clubs that overlapped and having families that lived in both areas. And these areas were buzzing, with Cubans, Spaniards, and Italians kind of making up this whole area. It just had a cultural vibe in these areas, and that kept these areas very connected to each other. So after World War II, Ybor City shrank a lot, but West Tampa didn't recoil as much. Ybor City was a little more dependent on this handcrafted jobs, and as industries started to be mechanized, West Tampa was a little less reliant on those cigar jobs. So Ybor started shrinking, and West Tampa continued to stay about the same, making it the real Cuban and Latin predominant area of the city of Tampa. And now we think of Ybor being a lot more like that, but during this time, after World War II, West Tampa was really the hub. So then in the 1950s and 60s, Cubans began to flee the Castro Revolution in Cuba and immigrate to the U.S., and West Tampa was a really common spot for them to land because there was a lot of Cuban culture and families already there. And as these new immigrants came, they didn't have to only rely on cigar jobs. They could fill other roles that were needed at the time, and West Tampa was the spot for them. But then as time went on, this area got hit pretty hard, and it has been really affected by poverty, by urban decay, and it has been kind of a typical thing that you see in the U.S., these areas that are built around some kind of manufacturing. When that manufacturing dries up, these areas just tend to decay. And really since the 1970s, this area has been kind of on a downhill path until the early 2000s. Some urban renewal kind of started happening in this area, some destruction of, decayed properties that needed to be rebuilt, some tearing down of old public housing and new townhouses replacing that. But there are still a lot of old cigar factories that are vacant or unsafe to go in. Some of them have been renewed and new businesses have filled them, or multi-use spaces have filled them, similar to the Oxford Exchange, which is kind of down by the University of Tampa. But this area is still climbing. All this renewal started, and then the recession hit in 2008, and it was screeched to a halt. Before that, the library there on Howard Avenue had been restored, and the Julian Lane Waterfront Park had been renewed, and a lot of these projects are starting to pick back up now as they are able. So right at the southeast corner of this area is the University of Tampa, which has iconic architecture for the Tampa area. This main building was built by Henry B. Plant in 1891 as a resort. He called it the Tampa Bay Hotel. And the architecture, this Moorish revival architecture, these minarets have been kind of a symbol of the Tampa Bay area since then. The University of Tampa is a private university and has sought to grow its student body and offerings over the past few years, really since the early 2000s when a new president took over. And I'm sure, here I'm lumping this into the West Tampa area, but I'm sure South Tampa claims it, and I'm sure downtown claims it as theirs. But it's right here in the middle of all this, and it runs right along the Hillsborough River. So, and then just to the west of West Tampa is West Shore. West Shore is mostly an industrial area and commercial area. It's kind of interesting how different these areas are. You can see what the urban decay of West Tampa, and then just to the west of it, you have 11 million square feet of commercial space. You have 100,000 jobs. You have the big shopping malls. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You have the big international airport. You have 4,000 businesses in this area. And this isn't a very big area. This is really kind of the second largest commercial business district of the city of Tampa. The other one being downtown, which we'll cover next week. This centralized location for an international airport is so amazing. I traveled a lot for my last job, and having to drive from Colorado Springs up to the Denver airport, which is way outside on the east side of Denver, was always a hassle. But this centralized airport really kind of centralized among the population, because you have a lot of population in the Tampa area and then over on the Gulf side area in Pinellas County. This location for the airport is really, really amazing. And this airport is also really easy to travel to and to travel from. I had a trip recently and I cut it a little too close. Got to the airport, parked my car in the garage because it was only a couple days, and took the train to my terminal. Then I got through security, then I got to my gate, all within 10 minutes. And I do have pre-check, so that made it a little faster. But that was pretty impressive that 10 minutes was all it took to get to my gate. Okay, I want to hit real quick on the main 4 points of this series. So proximity, style, size, and cost. So proximity from this area is kind of amazing. So this is really central to the entire metro area of Tampa, whether that is, the beach or the airport or downtown or the sporting events or shopping or job opportunities. This area is very, very central to all that. So proximity to all kinds of things is high. The style of the area. So this area has been, kind of renewed and flipped a little bit, but it's still an older style. Small houses, mostly craftsman style. Some of these houses, not being from here, my perception of some of these houses is like someone built a deck and then built a house on it. So you see a lot of houses that need to just be torn down and replaced. But this area seems to be taking its time to do that, and I'm sure locals don't feel excited about that. I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't if I lived in this area, but you can see a lot of businesses are investing in this area and, building cool office spaces. A lot of builders are tearing down old houses and building new houses, and this area is coming along. All right, so the size of this area, this is really just part of the city. So you just feel like you're in the city. West Tampa isn't a huge area. This Latin area isn't huge, but it's still just so connected to everything that it's going to feel like it's the size of the rest of the area. When it comes to costs, there are a lot of low-cost options in this area, whether that's rentals or short-term rentals or purchases. But as the area continues to be renewed, and its close proximity to South Tampa, to Hyde Park, to West Shore, to some of these more expensive areas to live for, like apartments and properties of that nature, this area is going to keep getting more expensive. And as these older areas get replaced with newer things, the prices are going to continue to go up. And this area isn't really a common residential area, at least for people that are contacting me on a daily basis. They're not asking about this area, but I still want to cover it because of the history of this area and my own just interest in it, because it is so fundamental to the history of the Cigar City of Tampa Bay, Florida. This whole area, this history of West Tampa is very important. Okay, so next week we're going to be covering downtown and the heights. So Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights, Ybor City, like that whole area. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, come back for the next video. It will come out Tuesday evening. Every Tuesday evening is when I'm shooting to get these videos out. And again, if you have any real estate specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out. My phone number and email are right there on the screen. Thanks for coming by.